So we sang that song a bit ago that Asher requested. I don't know very well. I know the chorus. I just love the chorus. Something about in all we do to honor Him. And this little essay that I have is called simply Honor Him. And it's actually written to women for encouragement to honor their husbands. And it was written at the request of a Christian woman. And it was written after some weeks ago I wrote something called Just Make Her Happy. A challenge to us men to cherish our wives and to do what it takes, just do what it takes to make them happy. And then one of the women asked if I would consider writing something like this. And so I'm going to start out by reading a line that you're going to hear later as well. And that is this, that when men are not honored for the romantic, visionary, give me this mountain kind of ambition that Caleb had in the Bible, they will shrivel into lusting, pornographic imaginaries instead. This post is being written by request of women curious about getting in touch with their man's heart. And I might say this is an unedited version. I just wrote this, and it might need some editing yet, but maybe you can help me tell me later what needs change. And they are just as sincere as the men who posed the same question to me about their wives. The title isn't quite as catchy, I suppose, but it's the simple truth. So I'm going to go with the simple title because men are simple. Not simpletons, but simple as in not complex or complicated. Actually, there would be a couple of other titles I could give this post as well. Titles like the aforementioned one, Just Make Him Happy, perhaps. Because when you honor a man, you do make him happy. Or another one I might have considered is, How to Keep Your Man from Having an Affair. Because again, when your man feels honored by you, he will be attracted to you. That's why so many affairs happen between men and their secretaries and so forth. Such women are often in a position to see his strengths and successes, but not his failures. And so they admire him, emanate positive sentiments of respect and approval, and they never get to see his downside. She may be as ugly as the wastebasket, and his wife an adorable doll. But if she's the one with the negative attitude in his life and treating him disrespectfully, his spirit will sense her as the basket of waste. A waste of his time, a waste of his energy, and a waste of his attention. Now, before she goes running off to her pastor for sympathy, screaming something about this guy on Facebook who's blaming her for her husband's affair, I hope she goes back and reads the other post about how her husband, can connect with her heart if he just will. Because the same guy who's feeling affirmed by his secretary is the guy who's spending time with her. He's the guy who's listening to her, and he's the guy who simply does what it takes to keep her happy. And be careful about that empathetic pastor, because just about as many pastors are having affairs as other men are, and for the same reasons. I'm stunned, as I'm sure you are, by the epidemic of moral compromise among men in our culture, even religious, godly men of admirable commitment and success. I'm not suggesting at all that women are to blame for these abysmal failures, but I am increasingly convinced that in many of these situations, women hold a master key to the moral health and healing of these men. And it's not so much about women dressing modestly, as important as that is, as it is about women honoring the men God has placed in their lives and brought across their paths. You see, you don't have to be the wife of a man to have an honorable influence upon him. And if it's truly honorable, it will help him to live honorably. So let's get to the point, you may be saying. How do I honor the man or men in my life? My answer is simple. It is spelled R.A.C.H.E.L. And if you knew her, then you know how to honor a man. All you had to do was watch her live. Rachel didn't just honor me. She honored all men. She honored her dad. She honored her brothers. She honored her brothers-in-law. She honored her sons. She honored all the men in the church. She honored the men who weren't in the church. She honored men in authority. And she honored men on Skid Row. It didn't matter if they were not always the best functioning specimens of masculinity or not. She gave them respect simply because they were who they were. It didn't matter if they didn't always do the right thing in her opinion. She admired them for the things they did do right and allowed those things to characterize them. It didn't even matter if there were guys who were hurtful toward her, her family, and or her husband, because she knew they were creatures made on the masculine side of equality, and she forgave them for their abuse of God's image. But I tell you, when men were real men, when they functioned as God designed them to be, there was no end to the ways she could pile on the honor. Nothing motivated me more to be that man of God in her life, her man of God. The R in her name stands for relationships. Being a woman, Rachel obviously enjoyed her relationship with me, her husband. She enjoyed being close to me. She enjoyed being open with me. She simply enjoyed being one with me in every way she could, including our sexuality. She was an avid believer in the simple doctrine put forward by Dr. Laura and Sarah Eggerich, who always asked their female audiences, why would you ever deny him something that takes so little time and makes him so happy? As anyone who knew her would testify, Rachel put the R in relationships. But most significantly for this discussion, Rachel saw all of my friendships as important. She respected my need for shoulder-to-shoulder relationships with other men. She loved my regular coffee times and frequent prayer summits with other men in our community. And when she sometimes felt neglected by me, she never resented me for it. She may have needed to work at maintaining good attitudes toward the crowds and circumstances that pulled me away from her, but the fact that other people loved me and wanted to be with me only made her admire me more. She honored all of my relationships. A equals authority. Rachel appreciated my desire to serve and to lead. If anything, sometimes it seemed to me that she saw me as the authority on everything. Sometimes I had to convince her that I didn't feel like I was an authority about this or that or the other thing. And she always seemed amazed and disbelieving about it. But you can imagine how significant that made me feel. Now, she wasn't like some women who have to have the most important or most powerful husband in order to feel fulfilled as a wife, and always needs to be impressing others with how significant her husband was. She was way too secure personally to waste time with such competition. She didn't really care about how I measured up with other men, to other men. All that mattered to her was that I measured up to her. She honored that role as the authority figure in her life. C, her name, stands for conquest. Contentment was the state Rachel lived in. And there was probably few character qualities more crucial, and there are probably few character qualities more crucial in a marriage relationship. But she was married to a man who loved conquest. And And while she would have been perfectly happy in a much smaller world, she loved my long-range vision and creative urge to conquer the next horizon. Now, not every man is exactly like me in this regard, yet God has put within every male image of himself that chromosome of conquest. But many women are afraid of it. Of course, we as men need to be tempered by our Creator and tuned into our counterparts, but conquer we will if we're allowed. I believe this is where some of the sexual addictions come into play for men. When men are not honored for the romantic, visionary, give me this mountain kind of ambition that Caleb had in the Bible, they will shrivel into lusting, pornographic imaginaries instead. Ladies, don't you dare require your men to read this, but I assure you, if they do, and if you honor their privacy about it, this paragraph will move them to tears. There isn't a single one of us men who are proud of our vulnerabilities in this area. In fact, we hate it. But we must embrace it. It is absolutely imperative that we not only be allowed, but encouraged to pursue our passions. And those passions will be honorable if we're honored for them. Rachel honored my passion for conquest. H equals hierarchy. Rachel understood my propensity to provide and protect. The eccentric liberals of our culture get all tied up in knots about this one. Equality to them means sameness. What they don't seem to understand is that if we're all the same, there's no difference. Duh. And diversity is the very thing they argue for. No wonder our culture seems sometimes like a dog chasing its own tail. Or in the case of our little shelter in the backyard, with a helicopter circling overhead, he knows it's up there doing something significant, but he's not sure what, or how to intercept it. And so he just runs in circles, barking as loud as he can. But those who understand hierarchy get it. I guess that's a redundant statement. But they do, and they appreciate it. The fact that our city elders get to sit in important meetings in marble-lined boardrooms, making long-lasting decisions about the future of Los Angeles, gives me no desire to join their ranks, let alone take over them. I'm just happy there's someone willing to play that role. So it is with the hierarchical nature of men. We will serve and we will die if we need to. There is something in our genes that longs to provide for those under our care, and when that is missing in a man, it's because it was raped out of him by someone, somewhere, sometime or other. The most gut-wrenching part of my wife's death was that I needed to watch her die, bound to a stretcher. There was nothing I could do. I still sometimes wail in the privacy of my truck, bouncing from chuck hole to chuck hole around the streets of Los Angeles, wishing I could somehow turn things around and die for her. Instead of seeing her die. Every husband on the face of the earth would feel the same way. That's inherent within us. And Rachel honored it in me to her very last breath when she said, "Please help me." She was expecting me to step up and provide for her, to protect her, to help her in her most crucial hour. E equals esteem. It's the opposite of shame. Most people nowadays think in terms of self-esteem. But Rachel had a way of giving it to others. man from our church fellowship who's been next to homeless much of his life found his sense of dignity whenever he was around Rachel. He treated her like a queen because she made him feel valued, and he misses her like crazy. I've often said that Rachel was the making of me too. Her esteem for me was authentic, not the cheap stuff that makes you feel beholden, but the kind that draws honor from you like a healing salve. Many women are shame-based in their approach to men, and there are always reasons for this. Traumatic childhoods and abuse issues in one form or another are usually the cause. Other times it's just poor parenting that has spoiled them rotten and sets them up for an abuse complex. So these kinds of women end up being super sensitive to the inadequacies of men, or anyone for that matter, but especially men. So the moment a man offends them or even surprises them in some way, they panic and respond with the daggers of total ignorance, not having a clue or a care for the masculine soul. The unfortunate thing is that most of these kinds of women marry because they can't get along without a man in their lives. It's a style of relating psychologists call the push-pull pattern. Come here, come here, come here. Get away, get away, get away. But unfortunately, an honorable man can bring healing to her. Yet it's rare, because just like water finds its own level, so people at the same level of emotional health are attracted to each other. Hence, an unhealthy woman will not be attracted to a healthy man. And so the odds are great of her husband being healthy enough to bring adequate healing to her. But praise God, all things are possible with him. And if they both keep slogging it through as they inch forward year by year, they can eventually bring healing to each other. I know these things because to some degree we've lived them. And we've walked with many others who've experienced excruciating pain in dysfunctional family systems. Rachel and I both entered our marriage nearly 30 years ago with an element of esteem deficiency. We were at similar levels of emotional health. Most of our abuse issues came from unhealthy church systems which took their toll on us. But by God's amazing grace, He surrounded us with a handful of contemporaries in the ministry that produced huge dividends in our lives. And while we wounded each other some along the way, through the mercy of God and because of our determination to go for health, our wounds were limited, and on balance we experienced far more healing than hurt, and have been able to help others do the same. So can you. Finally, L equals loyalty. Nothing defined Rachel quite like her loyalty. She was loyal to her friends, she was loyal to her siblings, she was loyal to her children, she was loyal to me, and she was loyal to her Savior. Because of such faithfulness, she is where she is today. Not only is she high above us, all in heaven with Jesus, but she is famous here on earth within the heart and memory of everyone who knew her. If you want to go where she went, follow her as she followed Christ, and you'll end up where she is. Rachel not only put the R in relationships, but as Sarah of old, who honored Abraham by calling him Lord, she honored me in the same way, and she ended her life well by putting the L in loyalty, not only to me, but especially to her Lord. So, anyway, that's what I wrote yesterday.